Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I think people are going to move to this session. We had about 60 people registered, but it's 10. Apparently, it's too soon, too early in the morning. Just quick words of introduction. When we discussed with the panel invited by the French ambassador to conceive this India-France technology summit, I was requested to talk about what we've achieved as Veolia in India, means mainly turning around discontinuous into 24/7. I said no, I think we should tackle some real technology topics. And I think one of the topics for tomorrow, because I did experience today some difficulties to convince stakeholders to embark on this route, but I'm convinced it will be the case tomorrow and the day after with the migration of the population towards urban cities. It's urban sustainable development, integrated approach, green city, smart city, everything around this concept. So that's how we decided to set up this roundtable. And I have to give the apologies of 2 eminent persons who had accepted to be on the table. Number one, Suresh Prabhu, the former 3 times Minister of Central Government, but he committed spontaneously without looking at his schedule. And Amitabh Kant, the MD of the corridor Mumbai-Delhi, but he was supposed to be here, but he had to travel abroad. So Arunabha Ghosh, who is well known in India for the works he's doing in terms of development of infrastructure, public infrastructure, urban development and so on, and who is also the MD of Commission for Energy, Environment and Water, with whom we've been associated this last year, has accepted to chair and to facilitate this session. So I will give him the floor and I leave him to introduce the speakers. Thanks, Arunabha.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Arunabha Ghosh. I run the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, which is an independent think tank ranked as India's #1 climate-related research institution. I'm delighted that Veolia has organized this, what is technically called a roundtable, but it seems to have been set up more as a theater-style seating. What we will do is try and make sure that despite the seating, you're as much involved in the conversation with us as we are involved in saying whatever we need to say to you. I also hope that as people come in, they will fill up the seats in front. If you remember the Republican National Convention from last year, there was an episode where this famous actor spoke to an empty chair, and it didn't go down very well. So we definitely don't want to be speaking to an empty chair in front. We want to be engaged in a dialogue with you. Now, we have many eminent people here up on stage, and I'll introduce them as their turn comes up to speak. But before that, I wanted to just make some opening remarks. This is a session on urban sustainability, the development of cities, resilience, infrastructure. We are probably in this room for many different reasons, depending on where we are coming from. I'll tell you where I'm coming from, because Patrick and Brun had requested me to chair the session a few weeks ago, but it struck me last week, at least, why I would be interested to be in the session. And what happened was I was stuck at Heathrow Airport, as often happens. My flight was delayed and my bags were also lost. So I was trying to kill some time. And this was in Terminal 5, which is the newer terminal that has been built. So they have a nice exhibit, which I hadn't noticed earlier, of the prehistoric excavations, the excavations that had been done of prehistoric sites that existed in that area. So I kind of started looking at the screen, and I saw that please come and join us. I saw that, from about 4000 BC, there's evidence of Neolithic, then Middle Stone, Mesolithic, Middle Stone Age, then Iron Age, and then Roman settlements, and then, of course, the Britons, and so forth. All happening in sort of layers of soil, but in that same area. And they had kind of interestingly superimposed the graphic of the airport over that. And all of this was, settled human populations, whether it was agriculture. Then they showed how the villages kind of expanded, so there was trade between those villages, all of that happening. So what struck me, the epiphany, was that we are here to stay for a while. So that could be either interpreted as we can deal with our problems in due course, or that we might as well start dealing with our problems now rather than leaving it for 6,000 years later. So I'm going to just, for the sake of kind of provocation and to stimulate the speakers in the morning, I'm going to just raise a few questions. And then I'm going to raise some questions as they finish their presentations, and I'm going to request you for answers or for further questions as well. First question I want to raise is how to count when we're talking about cities and urbanization, etc. So I'm assuming that many of you are far more expert than me on cities. So how many cities and towns do we have in India? Anyone wants to give me the exact number or take a guess? There is no exact number because there are different definitions. I think one of the speakers is going to talk about it. It depends, exactly. Right? But by one count, there are 7,935 towns in the city, in the country, of which 3,894 are called census towns. So almost half of that number are called census towns. So they're counted during census, but not otherwise. So how to count is going to be one big issue when we think about cities, not just as they exist today, but in future. Second big question is who to count. Again, we have many different definitions of what should be considered slum population, urban, semi-urban, peri-urban population. By one count, 25% of India's urban population lives in slums. But by another count, that number is much lower because the slum is only considered if there are 300 households in that area. So again, problems of who gets counted, who does not get counted, and accordingly the infrastructure is built and services are delivered or not delivered. What do we count? If we talk about water, and Patrick is of course expert par excellence on it, should we talk about non-revenue water? Should we understand what non-revenue water is in the first place? Is it theft or is it loss? Do we count sanitation while we're also counting water? Energy, again, when we say transmission and distribution losses, especially at the last mile stage, is that happening because of the inefficiency of the infrastructure, or is it happening because things are getting stolen? We don't have a good idea. Land and land use change. We've been working in states like Bihar, Jharkhand, where agriculture and urbanization are all kind of melding together. So if you're talking about recharging water bodies, you see that we don't have the requisite maps to understand, what existed before. So as land use has changed, our understanding of land and its dynamics and its role in the economy changes. Waste. Should we count waste? There are apparently 68 million tons of waste produced every year in India, at least last year's numbers. It will go up by another 30%, another 50% by 2020. And 91% of that is sent to landfills. So is waste really some waste or is it a resource? How do you count it? Transport. Emissions, what to count? Some of you might have read this amazing piece of news from China earlier this week of the air quality becoming so bad in northern China, especially in the city of Harbin, that the measurement devices have basically reached their limits. They're not geared to count PM 2.5 beyond 1,000. Whereas the expectation is it's actually crossed that limit. So emissions, how do we count it, etc. Most importantly, when do we count? Do we count our challenges, our problems, our issues with water, land, sanitation, waste, emissions, when we have a crisis, like we did with Surat in the mid-1990s? Do we count it when we have a crisis, as it happened in the Pudong River in Shanghai when pigs were floating around and the joke was going, if you want pork soup, just open your taps? Or should we look back at history and think about the great stench of London in 1858, when parliamentarians could not bear to sit in Westminster because they could not bear the stench that was coming from Thames, which had effectively become a sewer. And that's when they acted. So we can wait for the crisis to hit us and then start acting, or we start answering questions now. So it's in that context that I want us to think about the drivers. Will it be the votes? Will it be income levels, aspirations, technology, demands for resilience? What will drive us to start thinking and acting today? And what would be the enablers for it? Would it be crisis? Would it be taxes? Would it be regulation? Would it be trade? Would it be migration? People will vote with their feet, and then we'll be forced to change. So I've spoken enough. What I wanted to do is start off with an introduction for Mr. Pierre Jacquet, who's the president of the Global Development Network. He assumed charge as the fourth president of GDN just about a year ago, July of 2012. GDN is one of the largest sort of development research networks across the world. Prior to that role, he was chief economist for the French Development Agency, AFD, from 2002 till 2012. And also served as the executive director in charge of strategy for 8 years. Prior to AFD, he was deputy director at the French Institute of International Relations, where he was also the chief editor of its major journal. His career has essentially spanned public policy, academia, and bringing together policy-oriented networks on international issues. Excuse me. So I will step away from the podium now and I'll hand it over to the far more illustrious speakers we have here. But keep in mind those questions of what do we count, how do we count it, and when do we count it? Once we begin to answer that, maybe we'll have a path forward. Mr. Jacquet.
Does it work? Thank you very much. Since I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, I suppose I could make the presentation unless you object, but I don't know whether the microphone works. Ah, yes, it does. Okay.
Green light.
All right. Well, good morning. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank Veolia for their kind invitation to participate. It's a very important topic. My remarks will come from a couple of general sources. I'm not an urban specialist, but I've had many opportunities to look at urbanization issues and problems. One of these was the publication of a book which I co-edited with Laurence Toubiana, who is the head of a French think tank called IDRI, and Rajendra Pachauri, who is the head of TERI here in India, when I was at AFD, and it's a series that is jointly published every year by AFD, TERI, and IDRI on sustainable development. And every year there is a new theme, and in 2010 the theme was sustainable cities. So we had the opportunities to work with a number of the best experts on urban planning and development. And the second source comes from GDN studies. GDN is an international public organization whose mission is to empower researchers in economics and social sciences in developing countries. And we have run recently a project on urbanization in which several teams from various developing countries took part and provided us with research work and papers. So let me start in guise of introduction by a few remarks on cities and then move to sustainable challenges, some of them, and then to the role of cities and local governments and public policies. And I liked the introduction that Arunabha provided, because the first question, of course, is how to count and how to measure cities. I won't answer that question, and I think that in the panel more qualified persons will do it, but let me just mention that a few interesting features there. When you look at the threshold, statistical threshold that is used to define a city, in Greece it's 10,000, in Sweden it's 200. So what these countries call cities is obviously quite different. Then what is the urban unit? Is it the city proper as an administrative unit? Is it the agglomeration, the conurbation? Where do we stop? And if you take one of the largest cities in China, Chongqing, which in terms of administrative unit has 30 million inhabitants, this is larger than Austria. So would we call Austria a city as well? How do we define? And when you look at Chongqing, it's really a series of scattered more than 1,000 small towns and villages that create the administrative unit called Chongqing. So we do have a statistical problem of definition there, and we loosely speak about cities, and we all agree that urbanization is on the rise, and indeed we have a number of statistics to document that. In Africa, the rate of urbanization has been multiplied by more than 4 in the second half of the 20th century. The urban population has been multiplied by 16. Western Africa is right now a little urbanized, 31% on average, but the rate of urban growth is the largest in the world. And the pattern of urban growth is very different from the pattern of urbanization in many other places. So we do have a dynamics to take into account. In China, the current rate of urbanization is 47%. This is expected to increase to 55% in 2020 and 62% in 2030. What does this mean beyond the statistics? It means that Chinese cities need to accommodate 10 to 15 million new inhabitants every year. 10 to 15 million. And so you can imagine the challenge that creates in terms of planning, in terms of basic services delivery, and so on. Each month, the cities of Africa, Asia, and Latin America accept 5 million new inhabitants each month, as compared to 500,000 in cities of Europe and North America. So it's also clearly a developing country-based dynamics, which is very important because let me share with you a conviction that given that trends, innovation will have to come from developing countries. And in unsustainable cities that we have in developed countries, we are going to have to partner with cities in developing countries, also to help find solutions in which we in the developed world might be interested. And the agents of these innovations will be firms, both in the north and in the south, but also public policies. So let me now turn to, again, a second part of my introduction, which is why do we have cities? And in fact, the economists have an answer to that question. It's called economies of scale. And economies of scales means that with cities we have clusters of people, and these clusters of people promote the flow of ideas, facilitate the flow of ideas, facilitate innovation, facilitate the division of labor, and division of labor allows for more productivity and efficiency. We have more competition among suppliers, so quality increases and prices decrease, so more, again, efficiency there. We have markets because there are a number of people living together. We can build human capital because there is a demand for human capital in these clusters. And finally, a number of material and immaterial networks are created. These are basically the sources of economies of scale. The difficulty, and we have a mind that lacks simplicity, so we either look at benefits or we look at costs. And of course, we can't have the benefits without the costs. And the benefits of economies of scale come with the cost of diseconomies of scale. And the diseconomies of scale come from the same reasons, clusters, which means congestion, diseconomies of agglomeration, pollution, and the risk of social segregation, the organization of the clusters themselves. So one of my main themes here is that we can't have one without the others. So a big question about sustainable development is how we manage these economies of scale. But while saying that, we know that economies of scale are there. And let me give you an example right now. Even in the most sprawling cities in North America, what UN Habitat has shown is that the rate of energy consumption per head is better than the average of the United States, which means that cities are actually more efficient than dispersed groups of people. So we tend to see cities as problems because there is congestion, there is energy consumption. But, I mean, there is energy consumption and pollution because people are there together. These are mass of people, so it's quite normal. In fact, these mass of people are more efficient than when you put people disseminated over a large territory, for obvious reasons having to do with transportation problems, energy consumption when you move from one place to the other, and so on. So when you don't have the economies of scale, you are less efficient. But when you have the economies of scale, you have also problems to solve. So we should see cities actually in a dialectic way all the time as a source of constant problems that call for innovations to solve this problem. And I think instead of lamenting about cities emitting 75% of greenhouse gases emission and so on, we should just consider cities as realities on the move, in which a lot of things are happening. And that's what actually experience also tells us. But what that means, basically, is that we do have a problem with the conception of cities. What kind of model do we have in mind? Do we look for the European compact model or for the North America energy-intensive sprawling model? And in fact, we know that none of them is bringing the solution that we expect, and both of them are now confronted with unsustainability problems as well. This question about sustainable cities is the same everywhere. So that means that for developing countries in which the cities are being built, one of the big challenges is to avoid mimetism with what exists and to innovate, to find new models, indigenous models, and that's what innovation is about. Let me say a few words about sustainable challenges. We all know the anthropogenic climate change with increased concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. I won't comment on that. This is well known and well documented. What I'd like to stress is that when we speak of sustainable development, it's not only about the environment, it's also about the social aspects. And one of the big risks right now is growing social and spatial segregation. The pace of arrival of new urban migrants in the fast-growing cities in developing countries, these migrants settle generally in informal and anarchic ways. Only a country like China has tried to control that, and they have a specific permit system that allows to control the rate of arrival in cities. But when this rate of arrival is free, it means that people arrive before the cities are equipped to host them. And that means that they actually settle in very informal and anarchic way through slums, squatter areas that are poorly equipped, that are poorly served with basic life amenities, and that concentrate poverty. This is a crucial issue about sustainability that we have. What we have in many of our studies is that local governments and public policies can help. And there are ways to deal with that. There are ways to integrate people. There are very interesting examples. I'll mention a couple of them in a minute. I'd like to insist on three aspects. And this is partial. There are many other aspects to consider. One is mobility. The second one is morphology. And the third one is inclusive planning. On mobility, it's hard to underestimate the weight of urban transportation in these diseconomies of scale that I was mentioning, both on climate change, on congestion, on pollution, and so on. We know that the number of private vehicles is positively correlated with income and wealth, so as cities and countries become richer, we have more vehicles, more cars. But we also know that given at similar income levels, there is a clear difference between compact cities and non-compact cities in terms of transportation use, in terms of energy, and so on. So that already shows that the planning of the cities can have a lot of impact. There are many ways to address mobility questions. One is to do nothing and to start from the idea that congestion will solve itself. If roads are too congested, people will find alternative ways. This is one aspect which is actually less and less pursued, happily enough. Another one is to build new equipment. And in big Indian cities like Mumbai, for example, there are massive public investment in new road infrastructure to accommodate a growing demand for roads. Another idea is totally reverse, is to argue that when you create more supply of roads, you also create more demand for roads. So the way to solve congestion is not to increase equipment, it is to reallocate space to other users. For example, what Seoul did recently is to rehabilitate a central part around the river and to actually destroy a highway that was there. And that has not increased congestion, to the contrary. So that's a very interesting thing. And again, it's not going to be either or. Both solutions can have an impact on the meaning. You can both build new equipment and you can also reallocate space to other users. And you can use taxation as well to discourage, or you can use compulsory rotative schemes like Sao Paulo in Brazil, in which after a lot of debate, finally the local government has decided to implement its own solution. So that's, there are many ways to address the issue. And this is vital. I mean, mobility, organizing mobility goes well beyond addressing congestion. In a city like Medellin, in which 5 years ago, nobody, even the police, could go in some specific districts, now you can go there, and I could go there with AFD colleagues to visit some of the areas in which the police wouldn't go. What has happened in between? Simply this area were connected with other neighboring areas. And the connection was not necessarily with sophisticated metros. It was actually with escalators. Medellin is in a very actually slopey part of the country. It's a city that is built on the slopes, and the districts were not connected. And unconnected districts are actually traps for insecurity and problems. Okay. So I should speed up. This to show the weight of mobility in addressing some of the sustainable challenges. The next one I want to comment on is morphology, the way in which the city is organized, the allocation of space between various users, and the balance between height and facility of circulation. There is this idea that the higher the building, the more efficient the city. This is not true. When you compare the density of Hong Kong and of Paris, Paris has an edge, and Paris has lower buildings. So what counts is a continuous density of middle height building rather than a series of very high building. Why? Because when you have a very high building, you need a lot of space around the building to serve the building. So there are studies right now, and there are a number of institutes, notably in France, like Serge Salah, working on the morphology of cities, and I think this is very, very instructive and interesting. Let me end with inclusive planning. I think this is one of the solutions to use urban morphology models and careful planning of land use for various users as a crucial factor for thinking about allocation of space, thinking about the social segregation problems, thinking also about energy efficiency. This links with policy. One of the clear responsibilities of cities today is that they have become major actors of national policies, of sustainable development, of international actors, of laboratories for innovation, and in doing that, they have to take care of three major interactions. One is about technical issues and economic issues. We mentioned technical innovation early on in this panel. I think Patrick Rousseau did it. I mean, the point is that we can't have solution without the technical innovation, but technical innovation alone don't do it. We also need the public policies. For example, if you allow households to save energy efficiency, their demand for comfort and for energy use will also increase. So you may end up with technological innovation to save energy, but the behavior changes so that more energy is consumed. So in a way, you need to link that with public policies about regulations and taxation. The second aspect is very much linked to that. It's incentives and public policies. Each time we think about supplying new equipment, we need to ask what kind of incentives will be there for people to use and not misuse that equipment, and that sometimes implies, again, regulations and taxes. And again, the final one is the integrated conception of cities to think together urban space, mobility, connectivity, density, mix of activities. In the end, there won't be any single model, but I think cities are wonderful laboratories of innovation, especially in the south. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jacquet. Before I introduce the next speaker, and to create a more conversational atmosphere, I'm going to permit one question. It'll also force you to pay attention for the next speaker as well. So there's always the opportunity for one question after each speaker has spoken. If there's a burning question that you want to ask if you wait for another 5 presentations, please raise your hand. None?
First one is always the toughest one.
First one is the tough one.
Shift to the second one immediately.
That's yes, sir. Please, and also please, I think that, oh yes, there's a microphone there. Please introduce yourself.
Myself, Professor Chatterjee from University of Kolani. I have a question. Particularly in the mega cities, what problem we are facing now, the equipment we are developing, that cannot be totally utilized in terms of uses or misuses, as you call it. So what should be the policy? How we can manage that?
I don't think I have the answer to that. My only advice is that this kind of policies be elaborated through a debate with all stakeholders, first point. And second point, that we always think demand and supply jointly. And we take into account the fact that supply creates its own demand. So when you want to solve a congestion problem, you don't simply build a new road or a new parking slot. Because if you do that, you will discover that demand has increased as well. And we had this experience in Paris for many years before people started to question the models used for studying mobility, in which clearly the response of demand was totally underestimated. So we need to think cities as social bodies, not simply bodies on which you create equipment. And to understand that, you need to have studies. And actually, if I want to preach for my own institution, we need more studies conducted locally about the organization of cities, about the problem with city planning, and so on.
What is your views particularly regarding the boat nowadays, which is a very popular concept?
Which one, sorry?
Build and operate.
Could we? So that, I'm not just because I want to move to the next, but it's a great question, which I want to park, because I think there will be some other presentations which will also be touching on issues like that. So I want to bring that question back to the conversation in a bit. I think Professor Jacquet has made 2 very important points. One, that a lot of the lessons will have to come from the developing world, because that's where the rate of urbanization is rising rapidly. So you're in the right place. The second is, by the Swedish definition, we are half a city already in this room. So, but you know, the jokes aside, the point I'm trying to make is, I don't think that the research or even understanding the nature of the problem, the questions I raised, etc., cannot be resolved unless we first realize what is the community we are talking about, you know, and that has to be a self-identification. So I'm going to now, at this moment, bring in Mr. Imani Kumar, who's the Deputy Director General of ICLEI, ICLEI's World Secretariat. In fact, he's the first Deputy Director General from an Asian developing country. So clearly, ICLEI has also learned that lesson. And he's also the Regional Director for ICLEI in the South Asia Secretariat. He is, in fact, the founding Executive Director of ICLEI South Asia. Since 2005, he's been looking after the strategic development of ICLEI in the South Asian region. And as Asia gains increasing relevance in sustainable development, he envisions to make the region more reachable and to address the current gap between developed and developing countries in managing sustainability. So over to you, Imani, to to give us more lessons from the developing world, as Professor Jacquet has indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks also to AFD and the organizers to giving me a chance to speak here. As the Chair said, that we come from an organization called ICLEI. This is used to be International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. But we changed, obviously the world changed from environment to address more on the sustainability issues. So we moved from environmental initiatives to ACLE, Local Governments for Sustainability, a global network of cities dedicated to the sustainable development. We are a worldwide organization. We have around 15, 16 offices all over the world, headquarters in Bonn. And here in Delhi, we started our operations in 2001 as the speaker, as well as the previous speaker, as well as the chair in his opening remarks, clearly saying that it's not that something we want to, and the previous question also really brings that I don't want to bring the technology unless until if we study here, if we see what is the need here for the Indian cities. So that is how we started our operations early in 2001. I still remember going to the municipal mayor in Bhubaneswar city and talking about climate change issues. He said, the first point he said to me is like, Mr. Kumar, don't waste your time and don't waste my time. Please get out of my room if you want to talk about climate change. Really, I know that this is a major issue all over the world, but Bhubaneswar, unless until you link that climate change to their own daily issues, they are not going to talk about, they are not going to listen to you what we are talking about. So immediately within 2 minutes, I learned a lesson, I can tell you that. I asked him that, Mr. Mayor, what is your energy bill? Can I save some money for you through your energy bill, electricity bill, which is coming to your municipal corporation? I can tell you that immediately after that he said that he told his personal secretary, don't give me any call, don't send anybody for next 1 hour. I want to spend time with this guy because I want to save some energy. So I convinced him after 1 hour and saying that by saving some energy here in your city can also really address the climate change issues throughout the world. Okay, so unless until you link, unless until you see what exactly their need, what exactly their issues, we cannot move forward. So that is how we started. We started all over the world in 1991. We are almost more than 20-year-old organization, and then started operations. Mainly looking into the last line, if you can see that, looking into the global sustainability with a special focus on environmental conditions through cumulative local actions. So we are talking about more on what actions a city can take on ground so that they can address the global issues. So that's how the motive or the mission what we started with, and we have a political what we call the structure with regional committees, regional executive committees, and the global executive committees who gave us like what we should address, what we should work on to help the city government. So these are the 8 goals we work generally right now, actually for the last few years, and for the next few years. These are 8 goals actually very clearly, most like clearly talks about like what exactly the cities are required, what the cities are needed. This is on sustainability issues, economy issues, infrastructure, low carbon and climate neutral cities, disaster and climate resilient cities, resource efficient, biodiversity. We actually added this recently, the healthy and happy communities. I don't know how many of you know that the Royal Bhutan talks about the Gross National Happiness Index. And you know that the definition of the happiness changes from city to city, changes from citizen to citizen all over the world. So we are looking into how to bring that happiness index to the citizens, either in a city in Sweden or in France or in India or maybe somewhere in Indonesia or in Australia. we are all over the world, more than 1,200 cities as our members, and in Asia we have nearly 174 cities, representing 36% of the population, various offices in Asia, and we are really concentrating on the Asian country, and the chair was saying that I'm the first one here, but a lot of thrust is going towards the Asian cities now, and we have a lot of issues here. We need to solve that. It's not that there are no issues in Europe or in America, but there are more and more issues coming up here. We need to address those ones. One of the topic what they have given it to us to talk to me is on this is one of this project is called Asian Cities Adapt. But before I get into this, there's few more slides. I just want to give like the questions raised by the chairman in his opening remarks. The counting, not the cities, or maybe I agree that we should know how many cities are there, but what is that they need? What is that really? What are the real issues in the city? So that is where how we started. And in 2001, we started a program called Cities for Climate Protection India. As I said, that the Bhubaneswar case example. But we came out with a carbon emission inventory of 54 South Asian cities. That's the first time in this part of the world cities have really came out and talked about more on the this is what my energy consumption figures are, this is what my fuel figures are on the road, this is what even in the coal, the wood, what they consume in the city. So coming together, the accounting part, what the chairman was talking. So the city said that this is what is my carbon emissions in this city, in my city, and nearly I'm so happy when we released this report. 30 mayors in South Asia have, from all the 5 or 6 countries in South Asia, they said that, they told, I know that the government of India was not happy at the time, like by a mayor coming and saying that this is what my carbon emissions are, but really offline, I can say, put it, even the government of India, the minister at the time, the environment minister said that we are so happy that the Indian government, Indian cities have started looking into this inventory and looking for action plans further on that. So bringing together that the climate change related issues, the low carbon issues, the green growth issues, we have followed a process here in this country, in our cities. One of them is the Asian Cities Adapt project, supported by the German government, and we have partners, IIT Delhi. I just saw him, Professor, I don't know, I just saw your name tag. We have IIT Delhi involved with us in this particular thing, really looking into the scientific analysis, whether really the climate change issues are happening or not happening, what exactly happening to the city governments. I know it's not that easy. The Professor Das from IIT really said that, Kumar, it's not that easy to tell that, okay, just because of the climate change, Bhubaneswar is getting the rain or not getting the rain, or Mumbai is getting more rain in intensity. So if we take those into what we call the boundaries of the city, it is not that easy, but we are trying to link what exactly going to happen in the city. So there is a scientific analysis really happening. IIT Delhi helping here. We have Potsdam Institute in Germany helping from the German side, and we also have this project happening in Philippines. So University of Philippines is really a partner to us who are helping that. And what we are doing, actually, we went to the city government. This project is happening in 4 cities in India. Kochi, Vishakhapatnam, Madurai, and Shimla. These are the 4 cities which we have worked under this project. I'm sorry, it's Howrah city, actually, not the Shimla. Shimla is in another project. We have engaged through the city task force. I don't know how many of you know about the Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission. Clearly, the government of India says that you should have a task force, you should look into the issues, you prioritize those issues. But mostly in JNNURM1 happened on paper in most of the cities. But we are really bringing that task force and the stakeholder group so that the government, the city government, really can talk to them and see that what exactly the issues, where can I put my money into that to address those issues. That's one thing which we are doing, we are helping them. The stakeholder consultations, the perception surveys, the stakeholder citizens, and frankly, even even the professors from IIT really looking into that. It's not just only the scientific analysis. Go to the citizens and see that, talk to them, and how it is going to, the knowledge what they have with the citizens really help in analyzing these things. So we look into that, we assess the main vulnerabilities, we looked into the develop of the local adaptation strategies that was actually prepared now with nearly 7 or 8 cities in India, linking to the to various the schemes the government of India is coming out, or the city governments are coming out into that. This is, I saw that some of the brochures in the, about this conference. So we are doing also another project on the integrated urban water management, supported by the European Union, bringing out an integrated urban water management toolkit, so that the CPHU at the government of India level, as well as the state level departments, can really use the toolkit to address to the urban water issues, including the water drainage, the solid waste management, and the sewerage issues on that. We followed this whole process. This is a 6-phase process with various steps. So it's not just really going and working with the city government. It's not that easy actually also to engage with them. But we followed this 6-step process with the 16 tools developed, and it was tested in 3 cities, but now we are taking up to 20 odd cities in India, so that the cities development plans, the city development plans, as well as the vulnerability, the assessments can be completed and can be merged actually. That's what we are doing that. And what we are doing that, I'll take 1 more minute. Okay. What we are doing here is like, it's not just only doing an assessment, but we also need to see that, and then one of the points which was not mentioned before the speakers is that it's not that easy with an Indian government, Indian city government. Most of the times they don't have money, or most of the times they don't know where that money needs to be taken it forward. I'll give more examples when we have a discussion. But what we are doing is like, we have looked into this graphic. We have looked into the various issues coming out of those vulnerability assessments, those citizens engagement. Like for example, on the water, these are the ones. For housing, these are the ones, various action plans which we are coming out, and bringing together all these issues and linking it to the various schemes, either JNNURM scheme or Rajiv Awas Yojana or other schemes, so that what is happening really is that they don't know if a city of Nagpur gets like 2,000 crores, they don't know what to do. Like there is a wish list, but they don't know really prioritized issues. So through this process, we are doing that so that the money can be used in a proper way, and where the need is there on that. And I just want to give you that to the French technologies people sitting here. There is a lot of opportunities within these cities. So please go to these cities, help them out. They have money. It's not that they don't have money, most of the cities in this country, but they don't know where to take this money on that. So finally, what I just want to put is like the key message I just want to take it is like the cities need a support for project preparation and linking of the existing top of funding opportunities in an innovative manner. There is a need for assessments, as I think previous speaker and then the chairman also said in the morning. There is a need for an assessments, but there is a need for linking that, like what is exactly, it's not just only the assessment of the city, but what are those priorities, and linking that to the finances so that the actions can take place. And that is what is the need of the hour at this time with the Indian cities, at least I can say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Any burning question for the process that ICLEI is following? Yes, and please introduce. There's a microphone behind you. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Arunabha Ghosh. I also work I'm also a trained designer. Anyway, just to cut along, I work in cultural insights and cultural mapping and digital studies. In the 8 goals that you mentioned, I saw that happy and healthy communities was the last, and it has been recently added. I kind of thought that the structuring, that's a policy decision for your company to take, but shouldn't it have been the first? Because eventually cities are about people, and if you don't have happy and healthy citizens and communities, you're never going to get any of the rest.
I completely agree with your assessment, and what I can say at this time, it's not that order what we are following that. But those are the 8 doors where we can enter to a city. If as I said that in 2001, if I go and talk about climate change with the city of Bhubaneswar, they may not are happy. If I don't go and talk now with the city on healthy and happiness, maybe they may not happy today actually. So those are the 8 doors. We will try to enter in any of the door depending on what the city wants, but we address all other issues also.
Great. We'll now move on to Mr. S.J. Vijay, who's the Managing Director of Salmon Leap. He's a director-level professional with more than 25 years experience and expertise in infrastructure, SEZs. He was just telling me about special economic zones before the session started, special investment regions, urban infrastructure, solar energy, utilities, banking and finance. I think what I would like to hear from him is, how do you bring together different partners? Of course, there's a city or a government as a client, and then there's the private sector that potentially has certain services and offerings, and then there's the communities, the question that just came up. How do you bring all of that together into a quantifiable, measurable, accountable kind of strategy for urban development? I think we don't need to preach to each other about the importance of sustainable urban development. So a lot of the question is about the how. So we're turning to your expertise for that answer. Over to you. I think it'll have to be done manually.
Morning, my name is Vijay. I'm part of the company called Salmon Leap Associates. Salmon Leap Associates has been in the space of infrastructure for about 10 plus years. We have had the opportunity to work with people who have been in infra, be it the master planners, be it the infrastructure designers, be it the policy makers, be it Veolia, who brings a whole host of things in terms of not just water, waste management, transportation, energy, etc. And my presence here is because of our involvement with the government, more importantly, because of our involvement with the corporates who are engaged in creating the infrastructure. So what you would hear from Salmon Leap through me is definitely not the think tank perspective. That I think you have the best on the chair, and not an academic institution perspective. We do draw from them, but that's not what you would hear from me. Nor would it be an NGO perspective. We call ourselves Consult Actants, and we put the ACT Act in capital. So we take all this Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, blessings from there, and turn it into something that we can use, something we can really kind of use to solve some of the challenges. And that's where we come from. So it's a totally different perspective from what you heard so far. So having said that, the little brief I got was before Dr. Ghosh introduced me, on which the presentation was made, was, hey, you go up there and tell them what's the definition of urban. Yes, at least as far as the Indian context is concerned. So Dr. Ghosh covered that very clearly, what to count, when to count, and who to count, etc. So I'm not going to go into the format that is given to me, which is what would be in the presentation, but I'm going to share with you what we have gone through in these 10 years. More importantly, what we see as doable in the next about 10, 15, 20 years in this country. If I'm still around, I'm 58. So I hope I'll be around till 78, I can see that. Right, having said that, I'm going to torture you through the same definitions. This is, he spoke in words, it's in front of you for you to read. It could be 5,000 people, it could be 2,000 people, it could be a whole district. Statistics. So it's a demographic perspective. In fact, if you looked at Government of India's high-power expert committee, where it took the definition to understand what is an urban area, they did not go into the urban development, they did not go into the infrastructure, they were jumped straight into the census. Yeah. Went into the census and said, census says if there are n number of people, of which X percentage is involved in non-agriculture, then, and if it had a municipal corporation or a statutory body, then I would call it an urban area. I don't think it was the kind of parameters that we need to take to decide what an urban area should mean or ought to deliver to the occupants. The architect said, can it deliver, if not happiness, functionality, ease of living, maybe even efficiency? That's where we need to possibly look at. Hence, I'm not very convinced that this is a parameter which we can accept. What is obvious to the human eye is obviously the one that mind tends to believe as the kind of measure or the definition for an urban area. If we go by that, the look and form of the cities. The minute we talk about a city or an urban area, I think we have the images of what stands out in Paris or what stands out in India as Taj Mahal and et al. The Lutyens' Delhi with the Anglo-Saxon architecture is what comes to our mind. Is that what city is about? It could have been what the cities were about, but would that be what will define an urban area or a city? We believe, based on our work in trying to develop elements of urban infrastructure or trying to plan large land area-based cities as a whole, 32,000 acres, one single project in a state called Gujarat. It was not a city, it was a special economic zone. Today we are involved with the government of India, and the state governments are encouraging not the government but the private developers to go and develop what they call as the integrated townships. So if the integrated townships are to be done, what is it? The developer who is going to provide a certain level of guaranteed service and living facilities, how is he going to measure what an urban area ought to deliver, what it needs to be? Our belief is it should probably start shifting its focus and look for parameters and metrics which tell each one of us how efficiently a person in that city can live, how with least amount of effort. Is it possible to arrive at a definition now in a country like India, even where the existing definitions don't work? Can you go and set a new definition and expect to take action on the basis of an imaginary new definition? And possibly in India, we would take next 2 decades to agree on the definition. We are a democracy. Yeah. So what do we do? How do we? Is it no way ahead, or is there a solution? That's what we seem to be struggling with as a company when we work on these issues. But what we are increasingly believing is the following. This is something which we picked up from one of our associates from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He runs this urban program. He says, particularly the German cities, they all were, if you fly over Germany or Europe in the night, you tend to see a pattern. The pattern is they were all formed as habitations around a well or a water body. In the olden days, people could walk with a part of water only for a certain distance. So you do see urban habitations forming around as scarce resource. And then he shifts you forward into the post-industrialized era and says, in the olden days, a human being was born in the home, brought up in the house, in the home, educated at home. If he fell sick at home and he was treated at home. He married at home, baby was delivered at home, educated at home, etc., etc., until the time he was buried in the backyard of the home. From there, industrialization stripped each of these functions away from home, took it to specialized, to centralized locations. You were born in the hospital, you were educated in the school which was away from your home, you went out to work elsewhere because you are a non-agricultural worker, etc., etc. And then he brings something which is interesting. He says, let's close our eyes and look at how many of these activities which were stripped away from home, taken to a specialized place, is beginning to return home. How much of learning is beginning to happen at home? How much of healthcare delivery is at least attempted to be delivered at home? Is home coming home is the kind of question. Now, how is it relevant to the point we are discussing? The point of discussion is, if we are talking about in 2013 October, we are talking about building new cities, be it in India or elsewhere, we are talking about an effort which would run for about a decade or two. And by the time the cities are ready, we are building that city for another 5-6 decades. So the perspective one needs to take is that of what would the life and the needs of life will be maybe a couple of decades from now. Science fiction. So we said, okay, we won't jump that far. Can we, in the existing cities, at least in the tiny micro developments in which Salmon Leap gets involved, as much attention as we pay to the roads, drainages, sewages, water, power, can we bring in a digital utility? Is the kind of perspective we took. And what we do today is we do not worry about, like Professor Rousseau told us, we don't worry about the megacities, we don't worry about the densities, we don't worry about the heights. We only work on how much of efficiency is it bringing for the individual occupant. Are we able to reduce his time? Like one of the futurologists said, Alvin Toffler, he said, if you can stretch the time and shrink the distance, that's the way to add the maximum possible value to a city today. And that's exactly is the it's a generic, vague parameter, but it works. So what we did was, we are now looking at creating what we call as, we learned from the cellular industry, if you can have a cellular network which at the cellular level, GSM, has a very tiny setup, but it is able to operate at a global level. Can we bring that into the play? Is what we are doing. So we are beginning, like the gentleman from Eklai said, bottom up from the micro cities, actually trying to extend the existing urbans into urban agglomeration. And if you want to know what the kind of challenge we have in the country, also the kind of opportunities, our people are very fond of throwing numbers at people. They said, if India has to accommodate 240 to 300 million people who are coming into the cities, what should we build each second? What India should build each second on a 24/7 basis? India